I would like to say to you that what we think about God determines what we think really about everything. What we think about God determines what we think about everything. Wrong ideas about God will ultimately lead to wrong ideas about who we are. When we have wrong ideas about who we are, then it leads to wrong ideas about what we should do. So we come to Psalm 139, and it's a very interesting psalm. Of course, all of the Word of God is very precious and very important. And this is a great psalm in the Bible. Warren Wiersbe's an excellent commentator, and he outlined this particular psalm this way. I thought it was very good. He said that God knows us intimately, and we cannot deceive Him. And he said that's what verses 1 through 6 deal with. And then he says God is with us constantly. We cannot escape Him. That's what verses 7 through 12 are discussing. But then we come to the passage that we read, and Warren Wiersbe said that God made us wonderfully, and we cannot ignore Him. And most certainly that is declared in verse 14. I will praise Thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Now, the psalmist that wrote this was David. David did not know very much, if anything at all, about embryology, but he knew enough to be awed at the process. He wrote these words. It's an amazing thing about how a life is formed in the womb of a mother. But I want you to think this morning, while he didn't know much about that, he didn't know some of the scientific discoveries that we have advanced over the years and we have discovered, seeing that we know much more, considerably more than he knew, don't you think we should be even that much more awed than he was? I'm certainly not a medical doctor. I'm certainly not a scientist. In fact, science was probably my weakest subject in school. I didn't care for chemistry much at all. The only thing I enjoyed was burning things in my Bunsen burner. But I do know that if you just look even on the surface of things, when you look at the surface of things, really life is an amazing, amazing thing. Biology really will blow your mind. You know that every living creature is made up of microscopic cells. David didn't understand that at the time that he wrote this. I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. And I think had he known that when he wrote that, he would be even more awed. We are made of microscopic cells, and each microscopic cell really is a world in and of itself. I do remember that much about science in grade school, of going to the craft store and making a scale of an atom, and you buy little styrofoam balls and spray paint them and stick them on there, and really each cell is a mini universe, and it's an amazing thing to think that we are made up of microscopic cells, and each one of those microscopic cells are a world in and of itself, and in those cells that contain an estimated 200 trillion tiny molecules of atoms, and all of these cells put together make up a living creature. You think about it, I'm told that there's an intricate timetable that tells each cell when it should grow, each cell when it should divide, each cell when it should make hormones, and even an intricate timetable that would tell each cell when it is to die. I also am told that every minute of every day, some 3 billion cells in the body die, and the same number are created to take their place. I would say to you, without getting too in-depth and talking about it, too many a variety of anatomy and cellular functions, but I would tell you this much: we are fearfully and wonderfully made. In fact, verse 13 uses great poetic language. Remember, the book of Psalms is a book of poetry, and so there's some flowery language that goes along with that, but it's very descriptive and very eloquent. In verse 13, the Bible says that it says there that we're covered. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. The word there, covered, carries the idea of being woven together. He says down in verse 15 that we are, if you notice this, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. That word curiously wrought carries the idea of embroidered. And so here he says you are woven together and you are embroidered, and the poetic language is giving us the idea that God did not leave the making of a human being to the forces of chance. It's an amazing process with an amazing outcome. You see, in the womb, God weaves and He embroiders a human being. And if you think of that imagery that the poet makes, that he weaves and embroiders. Maybe you have seen where somebody would be weaving a certain fabric together and taking those intricate threads and making a beautiful cloth. And maybe you've seen a grandmother or somebody that was into embroidery, and they're making bit by bit, piece by piece, a beautiful landscape or a beautiful picture. And let me tell you, that's exactly what God does with human life. He creates, He weaves together, He embroiders something beautiful when He makes a human being. But I would like to tell you this morning that abortion interrupts that miracle. Abortion, if you think about it and you read the statistics, it dwarfs the evil of Nazi Germany in both numbers dead and the numbers of people who knew what was happening. I think if you study World War II history, and I'm interested in that and interested in American history, you know, that's one thing that you have to sympathize a little bit with the German people, that there were a lot that knew what was going on. There were a lot, but there were a lot of people that had no idea. And when you think of the atrocities of the Holocaust and the atrocities of those that did not value human life, and it wasn't just directed, although primarily it wasn't exclusively directed towards the Jews. It was directed towards the elderly. It was directed towards handicapped. It was directed towards other races, but specifically and in greater volume towards the Jewish people. But I would tell you this, that more people are killed in the name of abortion than all of Nazi Germany, and more people know about the issue, and that is a very disturbing thing. Did you know that 1.2 to 1.4 million abortions are performed in the United States every year? That's roughly 4,000 a day. Did you know that that's more deaths than took place in the atrocity of 9/11? Happens every day in America. Every day. That means that there is an abortion that takes place in America 3 per minute. 1 every 20 seconds, statistically speaking. And then I was bothered this week, as there are many people that would be preaching today on the subject of sanctity, or next week on the subject of the sanctity of life. And I recently read an article on yahoo.com, and the headline of the article said this: "Support for legal abortion at highest level in 2 years." And it made me very angry, because I think that there's dishonest and misleading journalism, which is something that we see quite often, I'll be frank, from yahoo.com and other liberal media sources. But it may be the highest it's been in 2 years, but that doesn't mean it's the highest up overall. Because I have noticed that there have been more laws passed recently making for stricter guidelines for abortion than ever before, and yet we have journalistic institutions, or so-called journalistic institutions, making it seem like this is just the norm now, and you're in the minority if you don't support such a thing. And I'd also like to say this morning, if I may: you can make it legal, and it can have a higher percentage of support, but you'll never make it moral. You'll never make it moral. But I would like to answer some tough questions, because there are some tough questions. And we must be fair about that. And so this morning I'd like to give you 4 answers to abortion's tough questions. 4 answers to abortion's common questions. Question number 1: does a woman have the right to choose? Does a woman have the right to choose? I don't want to shock you this morning, but yes, she has the right to choose. She can choose who her husband is. She can choose what school she wants to go to. She can choose what job she wants to accept. She can choose in the upcoming election who she wants to vote for. She can choose what she wants to wear. The problem is not the choice. And to be quite honest, I'm bothered at the hijacking of so many words in our culture today, and so many people have robbed the word choice from us, and as if somebody who is against the practice of abortion is against the right of somebody else to choose. I think a better question really is this, is we need to address what the object of that choice is. See, women have the right to choose. The question is, choose what? Well, do you think that they have the right to choose an abortion? Well, I'd like to answer that. No. Because I'd like to answer it another way. Does a woman have the right to choose to kill an unborn human being? That's a tougher, better question. Because yes, I think she has the right to kill an unborn human being. Well then, if she does, then why does she not also have the right to kill an already born human being? Because I would like to point out some things as we go along. The problem is not with the choice. The problem is what we are choosing to do. You see, by opposing abortion, we are not opposing choice in general. We are opposing one choice in particular, and that is killing children. You see, there are a lot of, you say, well, I don't like restricting choices. There are a lot of choices. We restrict the idea of somebody getting behind the vehicle of a car when they are intoxicated. Well, that should be somebody's choice. Well, we restrict the choice of somebody who decides they want to rape another individual. Well, that's their body. They should have a choice of what they do. No, we know that their choice with their body could inflict some harm on somebody else. And so we say, no, you don't have the right to choose to do that. Right? Are you tracking with me so far? So I'm not against the choice. I'm against what you're choosing to do. All right? Number 2. Is abortion right when pregnancy presents a risk to the mother's life? Is abortion right when pregnancy presents a risk to the mother's life? Well, Dr. C. Everett Koop served as the U.S. Surgeon General and was a pediatric surgeon for 36 years, so he's a qualified individual. This isn't just somebody popping off about the subject. He was the U.S. Surgeon General for a while. He said that he, as a pediatric surgeon for 36 years, was never aware of a single situation where a preborn child's life had to be taken in order to save a mother's life. So to be quite honest, I think we can dismiss this particular argument because it is nothing more than a smokescreen to the issue. Let's move on to the next question. Number 3, is abortion right when pregnancy is due to rape or incest? Is abortion right when pregnancy is due to rape or incest? Now I want to slow down here for just a second. There is absolutely no question, and everybody in this room would understand and agree complete with what I'm about to say. There is no question that these cases deserve great sympathy and great delicate touch. But if we could just focus for a moment on the issue at hand and not on maybe the emotional side of that, we need to ask this question: are some children more worthy to live because their fathers were better people? Think about it this way. If you found out today that you were conceived in a crime of rape, would you feel that you no longer had a right to live? I don't think you'd feel that way. You see, the point is not how a child is conceived. The point is that a child was conceived. And we need in this country, we need to get back to the place where we punish the abusers and not the victims of abuse. And I'm afraid we've gotten that backwards in some places where in our culture today, sometimes criminals have more rights than the people that they commit crime against. And that ought not be. And the issue at hand is, again, not how somebody was conceived, but that they were conceived. And by the way, you're talking about less than 1% of all those cases anyway. Number 4, what about disabled children? What about disabled children? You'll hear physicians and you'll hear people talk this way. You'll hear people talk about quality of life. But we are on dangerous ground when we set ourselves up as a judge of who has quality of life and who does not have quality of life. You see, I think that's also a very strange question for us in a society to ask, where in our culture and in our society we have special parking for those with disabilities. We have elevators for those with disabilities. We have ADA compliance laws for those with disabilities. And we could go on and on and on about the regulations and the things that we have to institute and be mindful of to help people with disabilities, yet we would say it's okay to kill somebody because they wouldn't have as great of a quality of life and they have a disability. I would tell you this morning, and I hope that you'll hear this, the quality of a society is largely defined by how it treats its weakest members. And I, for one, am thankful that we have special parking for those with disabilities. I, for one, am bothered when somebody who is not disabled parks in one of those spots. Why? Because we care about those that maybe have a weakness and that we want to look out for each other. That's what a society does. That's strong. We don't eliminate those. I think it's very hypocritical of our society that on one floor we kill babies and on the other floor we go to great lengths and great expense to save babies. Let's put it on a personal touch. Would you say to our assistant pastor, our Spanish pastor, Rafael, that his son has no right to live because of his disabilities, that he's not going to have the quality of life that you think a person should have? Would you dare go to him and suggest that his son has no right to live? We'd be aghast at such a thought. But yet we can sweep that under the rug in the name of abortion, in the name of choice. And I tell you, we've got to think about what the question really is. So we tried to ask a couple of questions. Some honest questions that deserve honest answers. Does a woman have the right to choose? Is abortion right when pregnancy presents a risk to the mother's life? Is abortion right when pregnancy is due to some immoral act like rape or incest? Or what about disabled children? But I'd like to ask an even more important question than any of those. Because those questions, I'll admit, are good questions, but there is one that is so much more important, and that is this: what is it? We need to answer the question today, what is it? You say, what do you mean? Well, if I was out in the backyard with my son and I'm blessed. I have two sons, and I'm thankful for my sons. But sons are interesting. Here's what they'll do. They'll find a bug or some kind of creature in the yard. And have you noticed that boys, they'll find a beetle? I don't know if you've ever seen a boy play with a beetle or something. They'll let them crawl on them, and they'll kind of mess with them and poke at. And then when they're done with them, they squish them. That's what they do. In fact, I don't know that that's exclusive to boys. I remember one time Mary, she's just my dainty little girly girl, and she had a little fuzzy caterpillar, and man, she was playing with that thing, and it was crawling on her, and she was playing with it. I think she even named it, and she was petting it, and she just got bored at it and stomped on it. I mean, it's just, okay. So I can see my boys were out in the backyard. Maybe I'm working and I'm doing something, and I can maybe see one of my boys. They would say, Hey, Dad, can I kill this? Now, before I answer that question, there's another question that I have to ask. What is it? Right? This might be a funny story to you. Maybe you don't relate to this as well. Being here in the urban area of California, I remember my son Matthew was younger. He got a BB gun, and he was shooting cans and shooting bottles, and he kind of got tired of shooting cans and shooting bottles, so he shot a bird. And he killed it. And my wife said, you really shouldn't just kill the animal just to kill it. She said, when I was growing up, my dad was a big hunter, and anything he hunted and killed, we ate. And she said, so don't kill anything unless you're going to actually eat it. So stick to shooting cans and bottles and things like that. Well, the very next day, he comes running in, and he had killed a robin, a typical robin bird with a red breast. And he comes in, he's got the bird, and he said, Mom, I killed this, I shot it, I want to eat it. So Mindy plucked the feathers and dressed the bird and fried it in a skillet, and they ate a robin. And I thought that was rather disgusting, but that's what they did, okay? So let's get back to my story. My son says, Dad, can I kill it? Well, what is it? Because the answer to that question determines my answer. If he says it's a cockroach, kill it, right? Right? That's why you're going to have to, right? If he says my sister, no, you can't kill that. Dad, can I kill it? What is it? The neighbor's cat. You see what I'm trying to say is the answer to that question changes the complexity of everything. So let's ask the question. Is it a fetus or is it a child? Is it a mass of tissue or is it a human being? What is it? We talked today about the compatibility of science and faith, and of course I believe that science and faith are completely compatible, but one thing I will say that science and faith both agree on is that life begins at conception. It's really not even a debate anymore. But I'd like to give you an illustration this morning, and I'd like to point out to you that there are really only 4 differences between a preborn human being and a newborn human being. All right? And I'm going to ask my son to come up here. Mark, if you'll come up here. This is my good bud, Mark. And I don't know if you know Mark or not, but he's my good bud. And Mark here is 7 years old. All right? And this is my son, my youngest child, my youngest son. And I guess we can't deny each other. You can tell we're probably related. All right? So you think about father and son here. There are some differences between us. While there are some great similarities between us, there are some differences between us that separate me and him. Now, which would you say about me and Mark here? Would you say that I am more of a human being than Mark is? Would you say he is more of a human being than I am? Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is the differences that I'm about to point out between a preborn human being and a newborn human being would be the same differences that exist between me and Mark. But yet you would not say about him and me that I am more human than he is. So as he stands here and feels a little awkward because his dad's a preacher and he's got him up in front of all these people, but I know Mark well enough to know I think sometimes he likes being the center of the show, so he probably doesn't mind this too bad. But I want you to think about this as you look at Mark a little bit this morning. Here are the only differences between a preborn human being, and I'm using my language on purpose, a preborn human being and a newborn human being, is the first difference would be the size. The size. Now, look at me. I'm larger. I'm not a large person per se, but I stand over 6 feet tall and weigh quite a bit more than my skinny son here. You know, I'm pretty skinny myself, but man, this guy weighs probably 40 pounds soaking wet and a stomach full of bananas. I weigh about 170 pounds. Now, here's the thing. Because I'm taller and larger and weigh more, does that mean that I'm more of a human being? Of course not. Your size does not determine who you are. It doesn't determine who you are. We wouldn't say about somebody who stands taller or weighs more, we wouldn't say that they're more of a human being. That's ridiculous. How about this, the second thought? The level of development. I'm 38 years old. My son here is almost 8. So 30 years difference. Would you suggest this morning that I am more of a human being than him since I'm older? I should be smarter. Now think about that. I want to clarify that. He might have a higher IQ than me. I hope he does. I hope he goes out and makes lots and lots of money and takes care of his dad the rest of his life, right? So he might have a higher IQ than I do, but at this stage in life, I'm more developed. I'm smarter than he is. Yeah. And that's not wrong to say. That's why God gave everybody parents, so that we wouldn't kill ourselves while we were trying to come along. And I'm smarter than him. I've lived longer. I have more experience. I'm also stronger. You know, I can grab him and pick him up right now, you know. I'm stronger than he is. He can't do that to me. Someday he might be able to. So that's why while he's this size, I let him know, you know, hey, all right? But we wouldn't say that I'm more of a human being than he is because I'm smarter than him or I'm stronger than him. You wouldn't say that. How about this? The environment that they are in. Just because they happen to be one in a womb and one outside the womb, that doesn't make them less human. Because think about this. If I'm inside a house and somebody else is outside of a house, it doesn't change whether or not they're a human being. Yeah. All right, here's the last thought, that is the only difference, and there's the same differences between me and him as they are between a preborn and a newborn human being. But think about this, the degree of dependence. Now this guy right here doesn't have a job. I want you to pray for him, because someday I want him to be employed. He doesn't pay the rent. He doesn't pay the light bill. These clothes he's wearing, he didn't buy. He doesn't wash them. He doesn't put them in the washing machine. He didn't buy the washing machine that washes them or the dryer that dries them. We're going to go home today and we're going to eat lunch. He didn't pay for any of that food that he's going to put in this belly of his. He's not paying for his education. When this guy gets sick, guess who takes him to the doctor? His mom. When this guy hurts himself, guess who gives him sympathy? His mom. This guy, when he wants to throw a ball, who's he come to? He comes to me for that. But here's the thing. This guy right here is, at 7 years old, he's dependent on me. I pay his bills, I protect him, I look after him, I make him go to school, I make him, you brushed your teeth today, didn't you? Okay, all right. He is dependent on me. But his dependence on me doesn't make him less human. Well, a newborn or a preborn human being is completely dependent on the nutrients of its mother. And a newborn baby is dependent upon the nutrients and the protection and the care and the provision of its mother. But it doesn't make it less human. Thanks, Marky. You can sit down now. So I'd like to say to you this morning, the question is not how old someone is, whether they're in the first or second or third trimester, whether they're 100 years old, because we're not even talking about the subject of euthanasia. The idea this morning is not, the debate is not about how old somebody is. It's not about how big they are, whether they're this big or they're this big. It's not about how smart they are. It's most certainly not about how inconvenient they are. The question is about who they are. And I would tell you today, well, what is it? They're human beings. They're human beings. And it's atrocious to think that we can so carelessly just kill human beings for the sake of our convenience, for the sake of our economics, whatever argument we want to give. They're human beings. So that brings us to another important question. Okay, well, what are we supposed to do about it? I want to give you a couple of thoughts. We'll be done this morning. And really, I shared with you these same thoughts, different message, but I did share these same thoughts, but I think we need to be reminded about them again. Number one, here's what we need to do about it. I'm not talking about them or legislators. This is what we need to do about it. Number one, we need to teach morality in the home. And we also need to teach morality in the church. I imagine there might have been somebody, maybe so, sitting here today and say, well, why are you getting on this issue? Well, if you come here week in and week out, you're going to find that I'm not an issue-oriented, issue-driven preacher, but I do believe that the Bible speaks for things that are concerning all matters of life and faith and practice and godliness. And so I think you cannot preach the Bible without preaching some issues, okay? And I think it boils down to, I think one of the reasons abortion has taken such a stronghold in our society today is we have gotten a long way away from morality. And I think we need to teach morals. We need to teach ethics. We need to teach in our homes and in our churches. We need to teach about how God created something beautiful and pleasurable and enjoyable in sex, but He created in the confines of marriage, and He created sex even not just for pleasure, but for procreation, And life is a gift and a blessing from God, and we as God's people ought to value it. So we need to teach morality in our homes and in our churches. And number two, we need to have compassion for the unwed mother. I started by saying that we need to teach morality. I hope you understand that I'm against sex before marriage. I'm against adultery, which would be sex outside of the marriage relationship. I'm against those things, but I just the same way I would try to extend grace and help to someone that has struggled with adultery, I would try and extend grace and help with somebody that has been caught in the sin of fornication. I think sometimes in an attempt to take a stand against something that is wrong, we have taken the stand against a person. We need to make sure that we do teach morality and we do teach truth in those areas, and we do our best to try and prevent that. But when somebody is an unwed mother, we do our best to try and help them. We do our best to try and help them. Number two, speak against abortion without apology. You don't have to hang your head if you're against abortion. I know the world would maybe laugh or ridicule some of the things I've said today, and I imagine maybe there's somebody sitting here this morning and you have laughed and ridiculed what I've said, but I don't apologize. And I don't feel like I've got to hang my head for anything. And I know the world would try, are you backwoods, crazy fool? Well, you need to get into the 21st century, and people don't think like you today. And I know the world likes to paint people with this position as some, crazy Unabomber that wants to blow up Planned Parenthood and that kind of thing. And you can think what you want, but I'm telling you, I want to speak out against it without apology. And you ought to too. Number four, I think we should vote accordingly. You telling me who to vote for? No, I said earlier, I think you can choose who you want to vote for. I'm just saying if you value life, I would think that you would want representatives in our world that value it as much as you do. And I want to say lastly, we need to pray for God to have mercy. God who weaves and embroiders the miracle of life, and we who snatch it away and crumble it. I think we ought to ask God to have mercy on us. Have mercy on us as a developed nation. May God help us. Let me ask you a couple of questions as we conclude. And I know I've asked a lot of questions, but here's a thought. What about your life? I would think you value your life. Everybody in here wants to be healthy and well and happy. You may not be those things, but that's what you want. You value your life. But what about your eternal destiny, your eternal life? The Bible says that when we leave this physical world, there is a spiritual world, and where you spend for eternity is determined right here and right now. And if you value your life, I would implore you to trust Jesus Christ as your Savior. So we often ask it in this form of a question. If you died today, are you 100% sure you'd go to heaven? Do you know for sure where you'd spend eternity? If you value your life, you'll make the wise decision in that area. And I would want to give you an opportunity to do that today. Second question is this. Maybe you know that you're saved and you know you're on your way to heaven and you value your physical life and you understand your spiritual destiny, your spiritual life's destiny, but what about this? How valuable is life to you? Have you taken into consideration these thoughts? Are you willing to come and pray for our nation? Are you willing to help somebody who is expecting a child? And are you willing to help them and assist them? Are you willing to reach out and do what is necessary? Are you willing to vote with your conscience and your convictions? How much do you value life? Because it's one thing to stand up and say, I'm against it. It's another thing to be active about it. May God help us today.